Greetings all, hope this finds you well as always. It's now time for our latest update from the machine shop at Gromont, what we're up to and what we're on with. The first thing I do have to say is I have to issue a brief correction on last week's video. A gentleman called Andrew Smith commented, and he seemed to be suggesting that I might be neglecting the welfare of my lads, that I might be denying them the possibility of a brew. I have to disagree with that very strongly. The welfare of myself and my team, not necessarily in that order, is something of the highest importance. And to suggest that I would risk dehydration, which in a workshop environment is something that shouldn't be forgotten about, it's certainly very hot and muggy at the moment. I just wanted to correct this. Also, I also want to put on the record that it was a very cold day in hell, but for any workshop that I've had anything to do with, will not have at least one mug, a kettle, and some tea bags. Yorkshire tea, please. We're not complete heathens. Somewhere in it. So anyway, cheers for that, Andrew, and I hope that's corrected any misconceptions you may have about my workshop. Cheers, mate. Right, moving swiftly onwards. A couple of other jobs we're on with. We've got a bit of progress on the axleboxes for 806 we saw last week. We're starting to get these machined now. Now, what we're doing here is these outer thrust faces, which have been puddled up with fresh white metal to rebuild where it's worn. This is white metal onto bronze, incidentally. It works quite nicely on bogie axleboxes for us. These, we're now built them back up with white metal, and we're now machining them back to the correct fit and tolerance. Now, we're doing this on the horizontal borer, and there's two reasons for that. The first is we did look at doing it on one of the milling machines, but there's a complete lack of acceptable reference faces we can use to set these up on a milling machine. So the only real decent reference face we've got is actually that thrust face, which is the face that's sitting onto the machine table. So what we've done is sat them on that, clamped them down. After a lot of a struggle, because we've since discovered that these boxes are a bit old and they're not actually as square as they once were. They've been dialed in true, and so we're now starting to machine them. That's the first reason. The second reason is a little feature of this machine. We have this table here onto which the work is clamped. Now this table can actually be indexed very precisely in 90-degree increments, and I'm just about to show you how. Incidentally, speaking of using things, if anyone as I walked at the shop spotted a lump of railway sleeper balanced on top of a set of steps and thought, what on earth's that about? That's precisely what I'm currently balancing the camera on, if it decides to behave itself, which I think it has. Excellent. Right. Okay, right. This table is secured down to the main bed of the machine by a series of usually 4 clamps that look like that around its periphery, okay? Right, if we remove those clamps, and we then take our winding handle, which does a variety of things on this machine. It's also, you get a rapid traverse on the table. We insert it onto this spigot here, and rotate it 1 turn. You will see the table may start to turn. Although there's a large mass here, it's actually very easy to turn. And what we've done is we've just lifted the table off the secondary table underneath it, so it's now sitting on a large taper bearing. What we can now do is remarkably easily spin that table around. You'll see I'm literally only using 1 finger. Spin it round until it's roughly in the right region. Line it up. Ish. We just need to open the guard for the next bit. And then I retrieve this, which is a large tapered jib strip, okay? This jib strip pushes in on this side of the table. This is a system unique to Richards, their fellow company Kearns. It's a totally different design than indexing the table. If I then push that jib strip home, like that pushes the table square, lower it back down. It's now sitting onto the bed absolutely square. I can then put the clamps back like so. But I have a little work of these machines and makes life a lot easier to use. I'll just scoop the camera back up. You'll be able to see how the jib strip sits up the edge of the table there and exactly what it does. And then there's another clamp to go back in there, and there's another 2 on the other side, and then that's clamped down, absolutely solid, can't go anywhere, and we can machine the other side of the axle box, okay? Right, Other bits and pieces, bits more rectification, thank you Mr Bowes, is ongoing. We've now got the little M pins in for non-destructive testing. So when Tom Goulding returns from his holidays, there's a job all lined up for him, Tom. Cheers, mate. And there's also some other bits like that lump right at the front, which is a a bolt out of the split big end, brass off the middle engine. We've also started the wheels turning on getting the bits for the expansion links done. We've got material in stock now, so that can start next week. And then finally, on the rectum front, Sean Bowler's been busy today, and he's got the valve eccentric out of the middle engine. This had worn, so Sean's promptly built it back up with white metal, and during next week, it'll be going onto the vertical borer, where it can be machined to finish size, and a good fit back onto the eccentric. Okay, so that's another job that's ready to rock and roll. We're getting there. We are getting there, honest. Those little bits for the crane that we saw last week, I spent a bit more time on the shaper, and we've now got, I always describe it as sort of removing the bits you don't need. On the top, we have the finished part, which, minus the wear, is going to emerge from that block of bronze underneath it. As you can see, we've got it rough machined to size in pretty much all dimensions. It's slightly over in this dimension because I want a wee bit of allowance for when I do the split brass. And so we can now start machining these grooves in where they sit into the strap, and then I've then got to machine the other half out of a chunk of actually round bronze, clamp them together, and then I can bore out the bearing hole at the middle. Okay, so that job's also slowly progressing. Right, another job that is also coming on very well is we saw last week Mark Redman was on with those pins for the crane. Well, amongst other things this week, including emptying all the scrap bins, which, to be honest, has actually made an incredible difference to the shop. It's ludicrous how something so simple can make such a difference. Mark's also made a very good start on with these pins. You can see there's one nearest me there that's pretty much finished and ready to go. There's another one which is roughed out. It just needs the detail work doing, like the lead on the end and the dumpling of excess material that's Mark's used to hold it in the chuck, chopping off and facing back. And then there's a third sat in the Excel lathe, ready for him to, well, I think it's pretty much finished that actually. I think it's on finished size. He's just got to finish it off, tidy up the head, put the taper on and whatnot. So anyway, that's another job that's well on the way to being finished. And also the lad's, he's taking lessons from me. He's learning very well, he is. He's busily expanding. We acquired this roll chest a while ago for a previous apprentice, and they've since left, moved on to pastures new, and Mark's taken it over so that, like me, he can have all his measuring gear and lathe tools and whatnot to hand around whichever machine he's working at. So that's his idea, and I prefer to work that way personally. I'd much rather work that way. So anyway, he's taken that over and he's spent part of the today basically getting it organised and sorted and all his tools in there. So excellent. The lad's definitely settling in very nicely. We've also got a duplex valve off one of the standards. I think it's off 76079, but don't quote me. It could be off the standard tank. That's currently in for some NDT work because there's a leak somewhere in it. And it's also just getting a general overhaul while it's in bits. Okay. And then finally, back through in the main shop, we had a new volunteer start with us on Monday, a nice lad called Craig Ossett, who's moved up to West Valley from Leeds. He's moved in a couple of doors down from our very own Chris Kelly. And anyway, he saw my appeal for volunteers a couple of weeks ago and wanted to muck in. So we've got him involved on this job. Now, you may remember last week we saw that bolt that I was busily modifying for Eric's bogie. Well, we had a bit of a problem. Actually, no, we had two problems. In the process of trying to change the second bogie spring, the lads working on it discovered that the adjustment nut, which is the thing that's on that piece of steel, was rusted rather solid onto the thread. The only way to get it out, unfortunately, was to gas axe through the bolt. It's necessary evil. They could not get it out. There were three of the lads on a piece of scaffolding pipe on a spanner on that, and it would not move. It's just rusted in there solid. So anyway, the gas axe through the old bolt, and so we need replacements because we've temporarily nicked some spares which now need replacing. So Craig very quickly cut some blanks to length. There's some chunks of EN19 there, which will become two of those bolts. The one in the foreground, incidentally, is a sample so we can get the length. The thread on that bolt's actually past it. and then we can get the other details off the bolt that's been cut in half behind it. Then that blank in the corner of the tin there is going to yield a nut, and then finally he actually made some swarf as well, and here we have a blank which has yielded a roughed out nut. The next job for that will be, it will end up in the dividing head on the milling machine. It will get a hexagon put onto it, and then we can thread it, finish it, and the job's done. So anyway, new lad, and he's a bit like the rest of them, settled in very nicely. Much appreciated. And also, if there's anyone else out there who fancies getting their hands dirty and coming and giving a hand, give us a shout. We can use pretty much anybody. Well, no, I can use anybody. If you've got experience on lathes, brilliant. If you've got experience on mills, brilliant. If, on the other hand, you want to learn how fractional sizes works, I've got a case full of drill bits that need sorting out. And, I mean, when I say case, I mean full-size cabinet. So, anyway, folks, if you want to get involved, hit us up an email. Check my boss an email at nick.simpson.nymr.co.uk, and we'll have you down here. We can use anybody. So anyway, folks, hope this finds you well as always. Hope you found it educational, informative. Take care, and I'll see you around.